As we continue here on South Bay Sundays, so I called my doctor not long ago, and he recommended a drug for me. And he also told me, by the way, when you take this, take it near bedtime because you might get dizzy. And don't stand up too quick because you might get dizzy and fall down. And I thought, really? Do I want that side effect? Don't we all have questions like that when we take pills? And do we want to start taking a lot of them? Well, there are 5 questions you should ask your pharmacist, and Linda Bernstein is here to talk to us. She's a pharmacist. And by the way, this is Pharmacist Awareness Week. Did you know that?
I knew that.
Oh, good. You should. So it was a big question for me. In fact, when my doctor said that, you might get dizzy, you might fall down, don't stand up too quick, you'll get lightheaded, I said, I'm not going to take that. I made that decision, and a lot of people don't realize we do have that choice.
You do have the choice, but I think it's always a matter of risks and benefits.
Sure.
And so there are ways of avoiding the side effect in some ways, because if you do get up slowly, then you may not feel it as much.
Right.
So it kind of depends on what the medicine is. And if one particular medicine causes a particular side effect that is very bothersome, there's a good chance there might be other medicines in that pharmacologic category that might be not having that side effect. And so if it's a problem, you should talk to your doctor about it, and maybe they can prescribe something else for you.
Yeah, so knowledge is power.
Absolutely. And when it comes to talking to your pharmacist, it's good to have a set of questions in mind that you want to ask them so that you come away from the pharmacy knowing what you're doing about your medicine.
Yeah, when I get my medicine, the pharmacist always says, do you want a consultation? And sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. And as we get older, we get more and more medications, and there's a problem with their interaction, too. So this all started with somebody telling me there are 5 questions you should ask your pharmacist. And here you are.
That's right.
Let me ask you.
Thanks for having me today.
Questions?
Okay. So here we go. So the first question is, what is the name of the medication and what is it supposed to do?
Okay.
So that sounds pretty basic, but in an emergency situation, for example, if you say to the ambulance driver, I'm taking this little green pill, well, that's not going to help them very much. So, and even when you go to a different physician who perhaps didn't prescribe the little green pill, you need to be able to tell them what it is. So first step is know the names of the medications that you're taking. Have a list of that's updated constantly if there are any changes. And it's also important to know why you're taking the medicine. Some medicines have more than one purpose. And so it's good to know in your situation why the doctor prescribed them for you. So that's question number 1. Number 2 is how and when do I take the medication and for how long? Basically, these are the instructions that you need to be aware of. And also ask them, how long is it going to take for the medicine to take effect so that you have expectations understood in your mind when it's supposed to start working. Number 3 are the precautions. What foods, beverages, other medicines, and activities to avoid while you're taking the medicine. Particularly ask about alcohol use and whether it's safe to take alcohol. As you mentioned, the medication that you were prescribed causes drowsiness. So in that situation, alcohol would probably add to that side effect, and so you'd probably want to avoid it. Also, as you mentioned, drug interactions can be a problem. So find out if there are any other medicines you should avoid. And that's the time to present your list to your healthcare provider and say, these are the other medicines I'm being prescribed by all of my physicians. Is it okay? And that's another service that the pharmacist can provide as well. If you work with your pharmacist and you have a loyalty to one pharmacy, they can start to keep track of all the medicines you're taking. And that way they can do a drug interaction computer screen and to see if everything is okay together.
Okay.
So, and then activities, one particularly to keep in mind is driving. As you mentioned, this medicine that you were prescribed can cause drowsiness. So it's generally a good idea to not drive or operate heavy machinery, as they say, unless you know how the medicine's going to affect you.
Okay, I have some elderly relatives who, a lot of people have these, the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday pill boxes.
Right.
And you open up that pill box and there's a clown car full of pills in there, a lot of different pills. You just mentioned running a computer scan on interaction of pills and so forth. Is that something you do often? Because that's something I've never heard of. Yes,
it's actually almost done automatically nowadays. It's part of the regular service of a pharmacist. But one thing that you might want to ask about at your particular pharmacy is, does your list of medications that the pharmacist has include over-the-counter products, herbal medications you might be taking, and prescriptions you get filled at other pharmacies.
Oh, okay.
So I found out, just doing a little informal research on my own, is that Walgreens, for example, now has a computer program that will allow those additional medicines to be added to your list. And so that's a really useful service to have a complete list of all the medicines you're taking. So moving on to question number 4
Sure.
Is what are the significant side effects and what should I do if they occur? Now, I say significant because, as you know, when you go to the pharmacy nowadays, you might get handed a sheet of paper that has lots of fine print on it.
Yeah.
And it can be overwhelming to read all those different side effects, or listening to commercials of drugs on television and they start rambling on about 25 different very significant side effects that sound worse than the disease that you're trying to get treated. Mm-hmm. So it's important to say, what are the most important ones I should know about, and in terms of common ones, but also what are the incredibly important rare ones that might be sort of atypical but could be life-threatening or very important. So like some medications might affect your blood and they might lower your blood count and you might suddenly find that you're bruising more easily. So those could be a really significant rare side effect that could occur. And then what should you do if they occur? Should you just sort of grin and bear it, or should you do something to avoid it, or should you report it? So those are all the side effect questions that you might want to think about.
Pretty serious stuff.
It is. Medicines are not to be taken lightly, and there's not a lot of room for error. And so it's so important to take your medicines correctly. And studies have shown that between 1/2 and 3/4 of Americans admit to not using their medicines correctly. And so that's a pretty scary statistic. And the reason is that the result of this can be people are undertreated. They could be poisoned by taking too much medicine. They might end up in the hospital, or perhaps even worse. So make sure that you know how to take your medicines correctly. Question number 5. Could be a number of different questions, depending on what we still need to know. For example, what do I do if I miss a dose? How do I store my medicines or dispose of my medicine? But one of the questions that I like to make sure people do ask is, am I getting the best price for my medication?
Sure.
A lot of us just go to the pharmacy and accept whatever the pharmacist tells us that this is the cost and that's it, right? But there actually can be variations between pharmacies about the price of the medication. And one of the great tools that are available on FamilyWize.org is, and that's Wise with a Z, so it's FamilyWize.org.
Yeah, we will tell you, by the way, while you're listening, why don't you maybe check out the website while you're listening to us, FamilyWize, WIZE.org. They've got a great little booklet there, and it's a way maybe you can scroll along and see what they've got to show you while you're listening to Dr. Bernstein.
That's a great idea. And so there are 2 tools on FamilyWize.org that we'd like your listeners to know about. First of all, there is a drug price lookup tool. So you can put in your zip code and put in the names of the medicines that you're taking, and you'll get a listing of the price for that medication in different pharmacies in your area. So you could do some shopping around online that way and see what pharmacy might have your medication at the least expensive price.
Generics come into a play here?
They will, and I'm going to mention that in 1 second. So the other thing that we have is a prescription savings discount card, and that can offer a discount in some cases. We don't promise it 100% of the time, but it's definitely worth checking out. You know, it's free, and you can bring it to your pharmacy and ask the pharmacist, will this discount card give me an additional percentage off or something like that? So that's definitely something to check out. The other thing you can do in terms of saving money is know your insurance plan and what drugs are covered under the insurance plan, and whether in some cases, let's say you're getting a brand medication, whether getting the generic version of that medication would help save you money. So ask whether a generic substitution would help save money for you. And I know that consumers have some worries about generics. Are they as good as the brand? Well, the pharmacist has a way of checking into that. There's something called an orange book that they check and make sure that it's equivalent. And there are only rare exceptions where you'd not want to substitute a generic for a brand. It's rare.
It's fairly common that one would be as good as a plain aspirin as good as a Bayer.
Exactly. Definitely
example.
Can save you money. So ask about generic medications as a possible way of saving money as well.
Okay. Lots of ways to save money, lots of ways to be smart. The side effects always get me, and unintended effects. I mean, Viagra was an unintended effect. It was originally going to be for something else, and now it's used, as for ED. So that always interests me. And a little full disclosure, I was once the announcer for Candid Camera, and as a gag one time, we had a bunch of college students who were going to try an experimental drug for money. We could pay them to do a clinical test. And as they agreed to do that, they would bring me in to read the side effects. And it would be like it can cause bleeding from the foot, an uncontrollable flatulence, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we would see how far we could go for $100, How far would you go for $100? And generally speaking, college students, they're living on top ramen, and they said yes to the deal. But it was all a gag. But it's true that the side effects aren't always funny, huh?
No, they're not. And it can be scary, and it can be, as you say, a deterrent for taking the medication. But as I said, risk versus benefit. So if you need to take the medication, let's say you've got high blood pressure, and the potential side effect is that the medication might lower your blood pressure a little bit too much, and you might feel a little dizzy, especially when you stand up rapidly. You just have to talk with them about it and say, okay, how can I avoid this problem? Is there any other medication that might not have that side effect? And so
talk to whom?
Talk to your physician, first of all.
How about your pharmacist?
And that's the other person, is the pharmacist, because pharmacists are very knowledgeable about medications from all different perspectives, how to use them correctly. They can provide special instructions for you. Let's say you're taking an inhaler for asthma. They can give you guidance on how to use it properly. Pharmacists are a wonderful resource. And I don't say that just because I'm a pharmacist, but I say it because
and nice
they are.
people, too.
Yeah. And, a lot of times pharmacists look very busy, and you might be a little bit intimidated about asking them questions. But nowadays, you should be proactive about your medicines. When they offer to give you consultation, you might find out something you didn't know before, so it might be good to say yes.
Yeah, and it's not as easy to get a hold of your physician, although some plans, including mine now, you have the opportunity to email your physician with a question, which is a really good thing. But often you have to wait weeks, before you can even contact your physician and have a conversation about what you're taking.
That's right. There's one thing that I wanted to tell your listeners about as well, is that there's something called a brown bag session. I don't know if you've ever heard of that before. But what you do is you might even contact your pharmacist ahead of time and set up a consultation time. Gather all the medicines you take and maybe do it every 3 months to clean out your medicine cabinet. Pull them all into a brown bag, bring them to the pharmacy, and go over all the medicines that you have with the pharmacist. And so what they can do is they can, first of all, look for expired medications. They can help you dispose of them. Look for any drug duplication. Maybe one physician is giving you a combination product of a blood pressure medicine and a water pill together. Another of your physicians might have given you a water pill. So that's a duplication of 2 water pills, and you may not even realize it. Okay, so they can look for drug duplication. They can make sure that the list that they have for you in the pharmacy is complete for drug interaction screening. So it's just a good idea, and take advantage of that kind of service that your pharmacist can offer.
The other side of that, and you alluded to it earlier, is your own personal behavior, because you're taking drugs and you can take the brown bag down, but you have to be truthful about what you're doing besides the brown bag full of drugs. For example, if you have 3 or 4 cocktails a night, or you love French food, and you're taking the Lipitor because you love your French food. And sometimes, I had that option one time, and I said to the doctor, I'd just as soon stop eating French food than start taking Lipitor,
It's a little bit like True Confessions. We have to be honest with our clinicians and make sure that they know about any special condition you might have that may not be aware of. In your case, this wouldn't be applicable, but for anyone who's listening, if they're pregnant, if they're nursing, if they have kidney disease, a history of lung disease, if they smoke, all these things can affect how medicine works in the body. If you've ever had a history of allergies to any medication, those are all important things to tell your physician, tell your pharmacist about.
So it's modern times, and most of us have computers, and most of us will surf the net for any kind of information we might need about the drugs we take and maybe the ailments we have, too. It can be a dangerous place. It can be a helpful place.
Some people go to websites to get prescription medicines, and that's something that can have its dangers. And some of the things you can do to look for in a website to make sure that it's a legitimate site that can distribute medications online is insignia called VIPPS. So it stands for Verified Internet Pharmacy Practice Sites, VIPS. And it's put out by the National Association of Boards of Pharmacy. I think that a lot of us don't realize that when you have a website that distributes medications, they have to be licensed, just like a pharmacist does with the State Board of Pharmacy in their state. And so if a site is not registered, they wouldn't have this VIPS insignia, and so therefore they may not be a licensed site. The other thing to look for on those kinds of sites is that there is a licensed pharmacist available to speak with. They should not fill a prescription that is not a legitimate prescription. So they shouldn't give you a medication that's a prescription medicine without a legitimate prescription from your physician. Make sure that they protect your privacy information, their private health information, and that there is a way to contact them. And if anything, whether this applies to your local pharmacy or those kinds of sites, if the medication that is sent to you doesn't look like it's familiar to you and you have questions about it, definitely ask, because sometimes errors can occur, or maybe it's not as good a site as you thought and they're sending you something that's not real or counterfeit. So definitely think about the good websites. And one good website as a resource is FamilyWize.org.
What's there?
Okay. Well, first of all, you can find a wonderful free ebook that I just wrote that's available. You can download it. It's got lots of great information about how to use your medication safely, effectively, and economically. So look for the ebook for great tips on how to use your medicines, the questions to ask your pharmacist, how to achieve savings through the different tools on FamilyWize.org, as well as through asking about generics and things like that. The other tool, as I mentioned, is the drug price lookup tool, where you can find out the prices of the medications you're taking in your area, put in the zip code, put in your medication, and you'll be surprised. You might find some variations on the medication you're taking in terms of the price. And then thirdly is the prescription savings discount card. Definitely worth a shot to see whether it works for you. And on average, some of the savings that have been achieved has been as much as 40%. But it's really on a case-by-case basis. Read the fine print on any prescription drug discount card and see if it's the best option for you.
Who doesn't want to save money?
That's what I always say.
All right. FamilyWize.org with a Z, FamilyWize.org. Check out the ebook. And Dr. Bernstein, thanks for coming in.
Thank you for having me.